Welcome! I hope you're ready for an awesome tale of political resistance. Today, we are talking about the Native American occupation of Alcatraz Island in 1969 through 1971. First, what I want to make clear is I am not indigenous. This is American history, but it does not belong to me. I am white. I hope to help educate on this topic. Okay, so our story takes place in 1969. Think the lyrics, Richard Nixon back again, moonshot Woodstock from We Didn't Start the Fire. Busy year. This was the height of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. And American youth was knee-deep in rock and roll, civil rights movement, Vietnam War protests, think Kent State Massacre, along with questioning the authority of the government. Also, important to the story, some of the youth were in the middle of the Red Power movement, a Native American push for self-determination. So, here we go. In this video, I'll discuss first the background of the event and the protests leading up to it. Second, the takeover and the reasons behind the takeover. And then I'll walk you through, thirdly, some of the story of the government's reactions and the Native Americans' reactions to the government reactions and how they both were using media to try and win their case. Okay, so, first part, background. What you need to know is that in 1868, the Sioux Treaty with the United States government, the Treaty of Fort Laramie, I may be saying that wrong, was the treaty that put the Sioux natives onto reservations. And it was agreed that all unused federal lands were to be returned to the Sioux. Now, when most people think Alcatraz, they think about the penitentiary. That's where our story really starts. The Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was a maximum security facility used to house the worst criminals. Its placement on an island at the Bay of San Francisco, surrounded by treacherous waters, made it a perfect place to incubate criminals. Since the 1850s, it was a military fort, and the main prison buildings were constructed in between 1910 and 1912. It closed in 1963, leaving the land unused. And people noticed it was unused. So, according to the Treaty of 1868, it belonged to the Sioux tribe. Now, we're cutting to 1969 now. Changes were being made by the government to the reservation system, which was already shoddy at best. And indigenous people did not appreciate this. One article I found, written in Phoenix, Arizona, and published July 31st, 1969, the summer before the invasion, shows this unrest. I'll show you here. They were protesting to impeach Walter Hickles, the United States Secretary of Interior, who was pushing to get rid of the reservation system, so indigenous people had to cut the cord and essentially assimilate into American society. It was this tension surrounding the permanence of the reservation system and already poor quality of the reservation system that led to the invasion that November. Media had close ties to the occupation from the beginning. The group that formed in the Bay Area was mostly college students with some families sprinkled in, but most were young activists. Adam Fortunate Eagle, and I'm gonna say this tribe name wrong, so I'm gonna write it up here, activist, and Richard Oakes, a Mohawk activist, were two leaders that emerged from this event. Fortunate Eagle published the book, Alcatraz, Alcatraz, I have right here, on the invasion. And it's a fascinating primary source on what was happening from the Native Americans' point of view, and what was it like on the island, and how did they stay alive on the island. So I used this as one of my main sources for this. And my other main sources were the California digital archives on local newspapers to see what the mainland white population was thinking of the event. Now, Adam Fortunate Eagle explained how he leveraged his position in the National Conference of Indian Education as an opportunity to enlist Indian support at the very moment when the new occupation was beginning. Quote, he says, We would gain national support and exposure just when we could use it to our best advantage to put pressure on the government. That was on page 71. They distributed the proclamation that they created at the conference and read it over. On November 20th, 1969, 79 Native Americans successfully made it to the island and started the 19-month occupation. Now, the proclamation, drafted by the Indians of all nations, was titled The Alcatraz Proclamation to the Great White Father and His People, 1969. Here's a quote. "We, the Native Americans, reclaim the land known as Alcatraz Island in the name of all American Indians by right of discovery. We wish to be fair and honorable in our dealings with the Caucasian inhabitants of this island, and hereby offer the following treaty. We will purchase said Alcatraz Island for $24 in glass beads and red cloth, a precedent set by the white man's purchase of a similar island 300 years ago. We feel that so-called Alcatraz Island is more suitable as an Indian reservation as determined by the
From
white
there,
man's
the
own
list
standard."
goes on to compare the island to Native American reservations by saying it has no fresh running water, sanitation facilities, healthcare facilities, educational facilities, and the population has always been kept prisoner and dependent upon others, along with other things listed.
So the purpose of this proclamation was to announce how mistreated Native Americans have been and still are in America, highlighting how cheap the land had been bought from them and the terrible conditions of reservations. They then continued the proclamation to discuss their plans to turn the island into a cultural center for the Native Americans. Because the natives had a radio station on the island, we have a recording of one of the leaders, Richard Oakes, discussing it in his own words. Listen.
Part of the work at the university would be like the BIA has now, on-the-job training, and then we would have at the academic portion of the university we would have Indian history and things like tribal organization, and also we'll have a spiritual center and an Indian museum and an ecology center. This would all fall under the curriculum, and also under the curriculum is the traveling university, and we hope to get this into effect before, well, soon, sometime.
Once they had established residency on the island, the government took immediate objection. The Coast Guard was sent to remove the occupiers after the first wave, November 9th, and after the official occupation began, they started a blockade on the island, later given up because it was already so isolated. The article that we're starting with shows how white Californians sympathize with the Indians of all nations' cause. It is about the rise in numbers on the island, determined to be between 300 and 600, and shows government-employed Alcatraz caretaker Glenn Dodson's thoughts on the natives. He says, "This is a noble historic occasion. They're fine, noble people, and they're not destroying anything." But this article is also a challenge to the government, as they invite Secretary Hickel, the man I mentioned they were protesting earlier that summer, to the island to negotiate a public olive branch in the newspaper. Now, the next article has the ball in the government's court. The government met with them. As mentioned earlier, the Indians of all tribes wanted to form a cultural center, so the government attempted to meet them in the middle by having them leave and turning Alcatraz into a park with Indian qualities. Though it seems, in my research, I was only able to find that this September 2025, there was an exhibit on the occupiers, but other than that, I didn't see much else about a park with Indian qualities in modern day. I love how clear the article demonstrates the shallowness of this offer. It is clear that the media, or at least San Francisco UPI paper, was on the side of the natives. It reminds the audience of the Sioux Treaty that stated federal lands would be given back to the tribe, and it also includes this nefarious line: "If they rejected the proposal," Robertson was asked, "would the Indians then be forcibly ejected from the island?" "Let's wait and see what happens," Robertson said with a smile. It is clear that the natives were being bribed off the island. They stayed, and we today can see the federal prison never became a park honoring Indian qualities. It became a park about the penitentiary. Now, as I said, the natives rejected the offer along with similar situations such as the Bay Area Native American Council, which the government stopped paying attention to when Alcatraz occupiers got a lot of power in representations for it. And trading Alcatraz for Fort Mason was also an offer that they rejected. Adam Fortunate Eagle in his book relays his frustration on rejecting the last two in his book, though he laments that they may have just been more government tricks. Regardless, starting May 9th, 1970, the running water and electricity were turned off on the island. This turned off San Francisco's beloved lighthouse and foghorn, and when the natives used social connections to get a new generator to turn it back on, they became the heroes of the situation and got the people of San Francisco cheering again. So there was a media win for the Native Americans, even though they were the ones at the loss with the water being cut off. According to a local newspaper, the Desert Sun, the natives held a Liberation Day at the end of May 1970, where over 800 visitors came and brought water to the occupiers and to join in a celebration. There were a bunch of people and even some celebrity endorsements like Jane Fonda, though she didn't make it to the event. Many college newspapers had extended articles and ads about the occupiers and fundraisers for them. Unfortunately, this came only a day or two before that all started to burn down, literally. According to Alcatraz, a large fire began on the island, and with water shut off, there was little hope of putting it out. A few buildings were gutted and destroyed. Even the lighthouse was temporarily out of order. Now, the government and the occupiers both blamed each other. Adam Fortunate Eagle claimed the news media slightly favored the government's opinion. He goes on to say, this preference may have been due in part to the unfavorable treatment the media received from the island security concerning their press pass to the island, which leads into another layer of this story. If you're wondering what he means by press pass, let me tell you. Many tour companies were using the occupation as an opportunity for money, taking patrons for a boat ride around the island. The island residents did not like being gawked at. So one day, a resident shot an arrow at one of the boats, and there was outrage. A New York Times article at the time by Thomas A. Johnson claimed the government had charged the occupiers with having 35 firearms on the island, and one occupier, Miss Lenata Means, spoke at a conference on the dock and made a brilliant show of throwing all the weapons they had into the water. All the weapons, as in a bow and 2 toy guns. But it wasn't enough to fully win back public support. Now, it's all started to come to a close kind of around that time, though people would stay on the island for another year. Over time, there were a few arrest raids that by June 11th, 1971, not many remained on the island. According to Fortunate Eagle, the last day was a beautiful day and many people left to go grocery shopping, leaving behind just a handful of people on the island. Then the Coast Guard arrived with guns to make the final round of arrests. From this newspaper, we see that the Californians had mostly lost sympathy and that the federal government was very serious in showing power over the natives. The article says, 6 bewildered men, 5 women, and 4 children were all that remained, and they were effortlessly ousted by an armada of armed U.S. Marshals. It mentions that fences, guards, and dogs are put on the island also to prevent more arrivals. I think this source shows the government show power and a strange backpedaling of mainland California's support of the natives was going on. The way that they simply say occupation force that once numbered more than 100, when an earlier newspaper said the government was mad because there was between 300 and 600. I mean, that feels like a bit of an understatement, just saying there was 100. It makes it seem like not much had happened. 19 months is a very long time to resist government on an island without water or electricity. This bittersweet ending later led to a similar event at Wounded Knee. But what this event really helped grow is Native American pride. In modern day, there are still a lot of problems of Native communities not being listened to. This group of people is often referred to as the invisible people. One of many problems, is the disappearance and murder of Indigenous women. According to the Urban Indian Health Institute, in 2016, 5,712 women and girls were reported missing. And of that number, only 116 were logged in the Department of Justice database. For social problems as serious as this, advocacy and media support can be crucial in getting the attention needed to save lives. So using the media is not anything new. If you're interested in learning more about Alcatraz, read Alcatraz by Adam Fortunate Eagle for an inside look from the perspective of the Indians of all tribes, or go online to reliable sites, or look for books by Indigenous authors at your local library. Thank you for listening to this fascinating history, and I will see you in the next episode.